Hi everyone, my name's Lily and I'm the book reviewer behind Utopia State of Mind. And strap in, grab a drink, because I'm going to be chatting about all of my thoughts about Jonathan Strange and Mr. Norrell, which you might be able to tell from the title was a miss for me for a lot of reasons. Let's chat about it, shall we? So, first of all, gigantic, right? This is something that I've been putting off for forever. People have been recommending it to me. I bought this, obviously, as you can tell, and I now, use it for weight exercises apparently. But this has been so hyped to me. And it's weird because I have a really close friend, Katie from the Shrieking Stack, and I will link Katie's profile down below. And I'd heard a lot of hype about this, and I texted Katie and I was kind of like, is this worth the hype? Is this a giant behemoth doorstop book worth the hype? And Katie was like, no. And then, you know what I did? I read it anyway. I read this anyway because I was doing a panel and people were recommending it afterwards. And I was like, okay, fine. So I got the audiobook from Libro.fm. So, I love Libro.fm. But I got the audiobook from Libro.fm and I was like, okay, I'll read it. I didn't read it for a very long time. But then I was getting ready for a katabasis, and I remembered that R.F. Kuang loves Susanna Clarke. I read Piranesi, and I really, really enjoyed Piranesi. So I was like, could this let me down? Could this giant text of a book let me down? And it did. It did let me down. I was reading some reviews for this, and I was kind of like, is this me? So I want to chat about it today for a variety of reasons. I don't even know where I'm going to start, but the first thing I want to start off about is the fact that I listened to this on audiobook, and unfortunately I would not recommend. Not because the audiobook narration is bad, but because this book has footnotes. And I've read other books with footnotes and they've been okay, but this one has a ton of footnotes. And for me, it just brought me out of the audiobook narration experience. I couldn't tell when things were footnotes. I couldn't tell what was not footnotes. And every time I read a footnote or listened to a footnote, I was kind of just like, ugh, what is happening, right? I was in the mood of the story and it took me out of them. So for me, I would not recommend the audiobook. And honestly, that might be a little bit of the reason why I did not enjoy Jonathan Strange and Mr. Norrell, but it's not all of it. I was going to chalk it up to being like, maybe the medium of this did not appeal to me. And no, yes, it did not appeal to me, but no, that is not it. That is not it. So I just wanted to mention that quickly before I start. Secondly, I want to talk about the hype. I feel as if Jonathan Strange and Mr. Norrell perhaps was a product of its time. There's nothing wrong with being a product of its time. This came out, I think, in 2004, if I had to figure it out. Yes, 2004. This is 20 years old. Like, I did not realize that this was this old, but this is 20 years old, okay? And when I think about fantasy that was coming out in 2004, which I was, to be fair, not super involved in when it was coming out in 2004. For me, 2004 is more of like a Tamara Pierce, Garth Nix kind of vibe. But for me, which I was never going to read this in 2004. But anyway, the state of fantasy at 2004 was very different and is very different than the state of fantasy now. And so a lot of people hold this up as kind of a really interesting, hyped, really cool book, I guess. And I do think maybe at 2004 there's a higher likelihood it was now. But I looked at my bookshelves when I was thinking about this book and I thought fantasy now is way different than in 2004. The unique ideas, the diversity of voices, just like everything has just blossomed since 2004. And I don't think it's obviously not a bad thing, but I don't think it's a bad thing to say maybe this was a product of 2004 and its time, because it's okay to say, that it is. And it's okay to acknowledge and witness and admire things for what it was, what it was when it came out, the influence and whatever when things came out, but to also realize that sometimes things are a product of their time and some things last and hold up no matter what, and some things, in my opinion, don't. So I just wanted to get that out of the way, first of all, because to me, when I was reflecting upon it and reflecting on why there might be so much hype and what the deal was, my main thoughts or my main feelings about it was maybe just this would have hit differently in 2004 than it does now when I think about it. And so that was certainly the first thing I wanted to chat about in my review, just as kind of a disclaimer, I guess, because I don't feel like I'm in the majority of people who don't like Jonathan Strange and Mr. Norrell. I think that maybe I'm in a smaller minority of people because all the reviews I saw were really great for it. So I just wanted to enter that caveat. And now I want to talk about the reasons I didn't like it. So let me first say that if the character of Jonathan Strange does not have any haters, it's because I'm dead, okay? Let's talk about characters first. He was an awful husband, okay? Maybe that's the point. A lot of times where I see these things where I'm kind of just like, how? Why? What? People will say, oh, that's the point, right? So Jonathan Strange was an awful husband. I'm just going to sip my tea, literally my tea, while I say that. But he was an awful husband. Just saying. Maybe he's an embodiment of the fact that can you be a good person or a good, in this case, man, and still be a good magician? I guess Jonathan Strange might say no. He was an awful husband. Like, I just couldn't really. It just, some of the book looks a little bit about magicians and their loftiness and their persona and wondering, I guess, a little bit of that theme. Can you be a good person and be a good magician? What does that entail? And I guess I would even further it. Can you be a good husband and a good magician? But Jonathan Strange is not it. I do not understand. It just justice for Arabella in Jonathan Strange and Mr. Norrell, because I was texting Katie and I was like, would it have been better to be a disgraced, penniless spinster in this historical fiction time period than to be married to Jonathan Strange? In my opinion, yes. He just was not a great husband. I think we could pretty much all agree upon that, okay? I don't feel like I should be in the minority on that statement. And to be fair, Arabella kind of says it. Arabella's kind of like, he's a magician first and a man maybe / husband third, or a man second. Like his identity, the things that he cares about, that's first, him being a magician. Okay, fine. Like, it can be like that. But Arabella, you don't have to be married to him, okay? It's fine. So that's my strongest feeling about this, right? Because I'm just kind of like, Arabella, you deserve so much better. You deserve a man who is more attentive and who actually listens to what you're saying. I just feel like and I know that miscommunication trope is a huge thing in romance. This is not a romance, by the way, but I understand that miscommunication is a trope. But this is like the longest volume of the fact that miscommunication trope could have solved more things. If you listen to your wife, it could have solved more things in this book. That's all. That's just all I'm gonna say about that. So in general, character-wise, I found this pretty weak. I did not like Jonathan Strange, as you can tell. I definitely didn't like Mr. Norrell. Mr. Norrell just felt like an ego trip to me. I just did not like Mr. Norrell. And my favorite character was Arabella. Maybe my favorite character, what also was the other one? I cannot remember the name of, basically, not so much spoiler, but basically there's a fae, capital F, fae, who has a person that he really wants stuff for. I'm trying to think about how to say this in a non-spoiler way. He was also a pretty interesting character, and that is something I'm going to talk a little bit more about. But character-wise, pretty weak. I felt like the women in these fae bargains were treated the worst. I felt like, unfortunately, Arabella didn't have much of a character besides being married to Jonathan Strange, and also her friendships that drove the plot along, like that were a huge plot point. And so unfortunately, I kind of just felt like all the women in this book were not really fantastic characters in terms of the character depth they were allowed. And unfortunately, that's kind of how I felt about most of the characters. I don't really feel like a lot of them had a ton of depth. Obviously, Jonathan Strange and Mr. Norrell were the main characters, but I was pretty displeased with how the side characters were treated. I don't know the name. Oh, wow, this has illustrations. I never even picked this up because I listened to the audiobook. But let's see. What is the name? I think Stephen. Yes, Stephen is the other character who's a side character, a pretty important side character in this one. I also don't think Stephen was given much treatment or much depth anyway. Stephen, I'm pretty sure, also is a person of color, and he is kind of picked by this Fae, capital F Fae person. And the capital F Fae person, is this a major spoiler? I don't really know. I don't think so. But the capital F Fae person is kind of like, I want to make you the king of England. And Stephen's kind of like, that will never happen. But honestly, you terrify me. You treat everyone like garbage. And as long as you don't treat me like garbage, and not literally like I'm fearing for my life in this toxic relationship with my capital F Fae friend, I guess this is just the life I live. And I just don't really feel like he was allowed much depth. And as I mentioned before, he is a person of color in London, or is this in London? Well, certainly in England. A lot of it takes place in London. But I felt like that was not given as much nuance. And as well, like 2004 sensitivity readers, the world of Fantasyscape was so different, but still I was pretty disappointed with side characters. And I do want to talk about one aspect which I did enjoy, which were the capital F Fae. To be fair, we only kind of really see this one capital F Fae, but the cruelty, the lack of scope, the lack of emotional caring that the capital F Fae have was really emblematic in this book, right? The capital F Fae does not care, and he treats people awfully because he doesn't care about them. He does not care about mortals at all. Mortals are his playthings, really. Like, he is kind of more or less just moving people around however he wants them to be. And so I did like that. I felt like he was also super one-dimensional. Maybe that's the point, but I did like that aspect of it. And I liked it, but at the same time, it wasn't enough for me. I want to go back to something I said as well, and one of the things as well. So I talked about characters, footnotes. I did not enjoy the footnotes in this book. I think for me, I hate footnotes in general. I'm sorry if that offended anybody, but I hate footnotes in general. This was such a... I feel like I'm coming off really harsh. This was not a good use of footnotes, in my opinion. Footnotes for me, specifically because I hate them, are supposed to be used for things that I really, really need, but doesn't fit into the book somehow. This was just kind of like info dumping. The reason why we have footnotes in here is kind of just to info dump bits about the world. And I would say half of the time I just felt like they were not necessary. And as I said in the audiobook, it totally threw me out of the story, which is why maybe I also felt like they were a little bit more unnecessary. But to me, this was not a great use of footnotes, and I did not like it. As I said, I don't like footnotes. And so for this was that was a bitter pill to swallow. Third, the length. I listened to this on audiobook. It took me 5 million years. It literally took me months to finish this on audiobook. And normally, I'm a fast listener, but I did not want to listen to this audiobook. I only finished it so I could start Carapaces, which I want to read more than this book. The length. Look at that. I do not think it had to be this long. I would say that the first 2/3 are foundational points for this book. I enjoyed the last third better, but mostly because the threads that are being put together and the actual kind of plot, you're just like waiting for these characters' lives to intersect, and it really only happens in the last third. And for a book this size, I think that's a hard ask. I think it's a hard ask to do that, to read 2/3 of the foundation and have it be like that. And so it kind of lost me. I would have DNF'd it 100% if I didn't feel like I owed it to R.F. Kuang. But, I finished it and I got through it. But I just felt like so much of the first 2/3 the majority of the two-thirds. Two-thirds is the majority of a book. Just did not necessarily do as much as I wanted it to do. There were a lot of scenes as well in wartime, and I was not sure why they were there. I wasn't sure if they were there to kind of illustrate the power that magic could have, but like this just felt so entitled to me, and maybe that's the point. Maybe I'm just missing the point to this book. So I guess tell me down below if you love this book and maybe I am just missing the point. But they're not great people. I guess that is legitimately one of the points. And so there's this entitlement to them, specifically Jonathan Strange, as he's like going around war and he's just like doing all this magic stuff, and he does not care about the consequences, the ramifications for anyone besides himself, which is why I honestly did not like Jonathan Strange as a character. I feel like we, in the year of 2025, are just so over entitled white dudes in historical fiction time periods who don't care about anything else. Like this idea of ethical magic, you can't find it here, right? There's only like 2 magicians in this book, for good reason, mostly this man here. And it just like didn't, unfortunately, I wanted that theme to go further and it didn't. It could have gone further. There's certainly the space for it to go further, but it didn't. And so that's another thing, I guess, for me thematically. I wish that there were more themes present in here, more thematic working in here than it actually is. I'm a big theme girly. I will excuse a lot for some really good themes. This didn't really have them, in my opinion. A lot of the things that I wanted to be explored, specifically about anything that I've really talked about, just weren't explored very well or very much in this book. And honestly, maybe I'm railing on the size for it, but if you have this many pages, if you have this many characters, and you're not doing that work, then I wonder kind of what the point of it is. If it's just kind of like an entertaining story for story purposes, that's also fine. But then if it is, then I can also say that me personally as a reader didn't really enjoy that. So that's another thing that I wanted to chat about. What else do I want to talk about? Let me go back to my review. Oh, I remember. I want to talk about the world building. The footnotes are attempting to give a huge comprehensive reveal to the world and what the world is about. But to be fair, the world is not that complex that you need the footnotes. I can sum it up for you, right? And maybe this is spoilers, so I guess go to this timestamp if you don't want me to explain the world building to you in like 5 seconds. But there are magicians. They have this idea of theoretical magic that you can basically read in books. And this dude, Mr. Norrell, is basically like, I do practical magic, and so you all can't call yourself magicians because you haven't done a practical magic thing in like ever, and so how can you call yourself magicians? And so he kind of makes this bet, hey, if I can do practical magic, you all have to basically never practice magic again and say that you're not magicians. And everyone but I think one person is kind of like, sure, whatever, fine, I'll say that. And then he does. I won't necessarily say how he does it because that is a major spoiler. But anyway, so now we have this world in which Mr. Norrell is the only magician, except Jonathan Strange is kind of also one because he has a lot of books, basically. Maybe I'm missing things. I mean, I know I am missing things. But anyway, that's a major world building to it. And so we have these kind of 2 major magicians in Britain who are there, and like they have different opinions on what kind of things you can use magic for, and different opinions on what books they can lend each other. Like this is an ego trip for these 2 men. And so that's kind of the world. So, but there are capital F Fae. They're in kind of the background there before this. So I guess the idea is that capital F Fae were around a lot before, but are not anymore, and are kind of, not for various reasons. And so that's what the world building, that's what the footnotes are attempting to do. But honestly, you don't need any of the footnotes in my opinion. And the world building, as I said, is not complex or weird enough or confusing enough to warrant 2/3 of the book. I mean, how many pages is this one, right? This one is, my hard copy book is like 780 pages. So whatever 2/3 is, I'll leave it up here because this one cannot necessarily do math very well, you don't really need that much to describe the world building. And so if the world building was a super complex thing where you needed a bunch of footnotes, maybe then I would be more forgiving. But as a major hater of footnotes, I'm not that forgiving. And so for me, the world building didn't take it to where I wanted it to for this length. So let's see, I talked about world, I talked about characters, I talked about themes. Let me go to my review on my blog, which I will link down below, to see if I have anything else I want to say about this book. Yes, length, magic, whatever. Worst husband ever, definitely true. Let's see. Oh, I talked about the time of it. Okay. Would I recommend this book? Let's just end there. Would I recommend this book? As I will quote from my review, I'd say try the first few chapters if you really want to. But if it doesn't work for you, let it go. I wish I had. And it's true, I kind of wish that I had DNF'd it. There were so many other books I wanted to listen to on audiobook, or books I wanted to read, which I put down for this particular reason, and I didn't read them, and I chose to kind of struggle through this one, and I kind of wish I didn't. Maybe I would feel more favorable about the book if I did. I mean, I wouldn't have finished it, but maybe I would feel more favorable to it if I did. But I spent a lot of time on this book, months of my life, months of my ear's life on this book, and I just was kind of disappointed by it. It made me feel really strange because I was kind of like, am I just missing something exactly huge, right? Am I just missing the point? But then I was like, well, either way, these are my feelings, and I think it is worth talking about. I'm going to wrap this up, but I think it is worth talking about because a lot of people have chatted about this, and I do think it's worth talking about as we think about books that have been released years ago, decades ago in this case, 2 decades ago in this case, to kind of think about the lastingness of books, the evergreen quality of books, and the idea that some books exist in a very specific time period, a specific time moment, and sometimes you just can't get back to it. I was talking to a lot of people about Shatter Me When I Finished by Tahara Mafi, and while I did have those thoughts, and I did talk about those thoughts, which I guess I can link down below, they're not at all related. A lot of people were like, this is a product of its time, right? At this time, this narration style was different. At this time, in this kind of dystopian-esque feeling, this is how it felt. And so I was like, okay, interesting. I can, admire it or experience it differently, but knowing now at the hype, knowing what I experience now, it's worth kind of thinking about books when when you've missed the bandwagon, also books that have moved on in time period, and in the ways that conversations about fantasy, about historical fiction, about, this particular book can change and can evolve and develop, that are different to how it was when it first came out. And so I was debating about whether or not to make this video. I kind of felt like I was going to be the biggest hater. I felt like this would also be a very polarizing video and whatnot. But I did want to talk about it specifically because of this reason, and because I'm really interested in people's thoughts about it. I'm really interested to kind of know from you all if you have other books that you've kind of felt this similar way, or feel like they function more as a product of their time, a specific moment, and kind of open up that conversation as well as a bookend to my thoughts about Jonathan Strange and Mr. Norrell. So I hope you enjoyed. I'm very sorry if this is like your pride and joy #1 favorite book. I just want to offer my thoughts about it, and I hope that I haven't made you hate me too badly. I hope you have a really great rest of your reading day, week, month, and year, and I will see you in the next video, I hope, if you decide to stick around with me. Okay, bye.